Hi, I'm Helen Bauer, and this is the Heart of Hospice podcast. The Heart of Hospice podcast is your source for compassionate and informative discussions about hospice and end-of-life care. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse with over 15 years of experience. Whether you're a caregiver, someone with a serious illness, or you simply need to know more about hospice care, this podcast is for you. Join me as we explore all the aspects of hospice, from the details of caregiving to the emotional and spiritual dimensions of end-of-life journeys. For more resources and to connect with me, visit theheartofhospice.com and find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Keep listening for today's episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This episode is sponsored by Hospice Navigation Services. When you need information about hospice, Hospice Navigation Services is here to help. An expert navigator will answer your questions about end-of-life care and give you the tools to feel confident in your decisions. A hospice navigation session is a great way to troubleshoot your current hospice care. It's your journey. We can be your guide. Visit hospicenavigation.com to schedule your hospice navigation session today.
In today's episode, I'm talking with RamDev Dale Borglum about his 40-year career working with the conscious dying movement and those on the edge of illness, death, and loss. RamDev Dale Borglum is a pioneering figure in the conscious dying movement, known for his contributions to end-of-life care and spiritual support. As the founder and director of the Hahnemann Foundation Dying Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico, he established the first residential facility in the U.S. dedicated to supporting conscious dying experiences with clients. Dale played a pivotal role in laying the foundation for the conscious dying movement in close collaboration with luminaries such as Ram Dass, Stephen Levine, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. His expertise in meditation, which has been refined since 1968, has been instrumental in his teachings and inspirational workshops. Within his teachings, Dale also places emphasis on living consciously and compassionately to overcome our individual collective fear of death. In this interview with me, Dale shares that he once prayed that he would not be given power until he was wise enough to use it. And he's now been working for 40 years and says that even though he just sort of fell into working with dying, he's still writing and active and working. He says, Western civilization has a collective fear of death. He also says conscious dying is conscious living at the end of life. First, it's about being mindful. The second level is about having an open heart, and Dale goes on to share the higher levels of consciousness at the end of life. He says that we've gotten better at talking about death and dying over the last 40 years in the U.S. You can find Dale's work and information about him at livingdying.org. livingdying.org. You'll be able to subscribe there, check out the courses that they offer, some for free, some for fees, and also to be notified when his new book releases. So check out livingdying.org. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Dale Borglum. There's a lot to learn. Dale, welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast. I'm so glad to have you with me today.
And it's a real pleasure to be here, Helen. Thank you for having me.
We're going to get started with an icebreaker question that I like to sneak in. And actually, I told you your icebreaker question. I have to tell you that of all the guests I've interviewed, you are the only one that I ever gave that to ahead of time.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that means that you think that I need extra help or you respect me enough you're doing me a favor. It could be either one of those two.
We'll go with respect. So your icebreaker question is, if you can, just use one word, but use one word to describe how you feel about your work.
Well, when you said that, was when we were doing a little bit of warm-up, immediately the word came to my mind, fulfilled. And I started this work so long ago with Ramdas and Stephen Levine. I was always the junior partner in the triumvirate there. And Ramdas died, Stephen died. I'm the last man left standing here in some kind of way. And strangely enough, I'm beginning to peak now in my 80s. And I've got a book coming out in the spring. I've got a movie about me coming out, I think, in the spring. The Living Dying Project has tripled its number of clients and volunteers and budget in the last 3 years. Everything is really happening. And why it's taken me so long, either it's because I'm stubborn, or a really long time ago, I did pray that please don't give me power until I'm wise enough to use it. Because I saw what was happening to a lot of people who were getting it a little before they were wise enough to use it. And maybe I've only been wise enough very recently. So anyway, fulfill.
That's beautiful. I hope that when I'm in my 80s, I'll be able to say something like that I'm still growing and things are moving in my life. How wonderful that is. Very nice. So you have been working with the dying for over 40 years now. What drew you to this work? And what keeps you in it after all these years? But what drew you to this work?
Well, it isn't that I had some big attraction to dying. I was living with Ramdas near Santa Cruz, California, and he had been going around talking about conscious dying for a long time. He was friends with a guy named Aldous Huxley, who wrote a book called Island. And in this book, Island, there was a utopian community that had a center for conscious dying. So Ramos thought, what a great idea. And he talked about it, but this was like the late 60s, early 70s, I believe. And society was not ready for conscious dying. They weren't even ready to talk about dying. So then Elizabeth Kubler-Ross showed up on the scene, and she started talking about just dying in general. And at one point, Ramdas was teaching a workshop in Rhode Island at which Elizabeth came as a participant and at which Stephen Levine was the meditation teacher. Stephen and Elizabeth really hit it off. She invited him to start teaching meditation at her retreats, which he did. That went on for a while. She started getting into violent psychodrama, which didn't dovetail too well with Buddhist meditation. So Stephen and Elizabeth amicably parted ways, and Ramdas invited him to do this work of talking about conscious dying. Stephen was a poet, a writer, a publisher, and a very committed meditator. And he was basically talking about bringing mindfulness and compassion into the encounter with death and dying. So after he stopped working with Stephen, Ramdas invited him to do what he was doing as part of what was called the Hanuman Foundation that I was the executive director of. And Ramdas and I very quickly saw that what Stephen was doing was the most interesting thing going on in our foundation, and we started teaching with him. And then we thought, wouldn't it be a great idea to actually have a place, instead of just talking about conscious dying, brick and mortar place where people could come to die consciously. We all moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1980, and Ramdas and Stephen both disappeared. Stephen got married, and Ramdas, very good at initiating, not so good at follow-through. And he disappeared into the ether. So I started this place called the Dying Center. That went on for 4 or 5 years. We took care of people free of charge. fed them, and helped them die consciously. I think about 85 or 86 people came in the course of 3.5 years. And then I moved back to California, and I continued doing the work, although I didn't have a brick and mortar place. I just started teaching workshops, training volunteers to go into the community and do the same kind of work. So one of my first meditation teachers, Trungpa Rinpoche, said, until you come in intimate contact with death, your spiritual practice will have the quality of you being a dilettante. And I really wanted to wake up. I got a PhD in math before I woke up and said, what am I doing here? I don't want to do this. And my mind was kind of a shambles from all that 10 years of studying math at undergraduate and graduate level. And I just wanted to be happy. I wanted to open my heart. I wanted to connect with God, with people, with myself. And it just seemed to me that being in a relationship, an intimate relationship with people who were dying, grieving, and caregiving was a really wonderful inspiration to practice, right? I mean, I know a lot of people who do a lot of meditating and they don't have much relationship with dying, and they can get really clear, but something's missing. And I know a lot of people who are out on the front lines of taking care of people who are dying, and they don't have an inner contemplative practice, and really often that leads to burnout. So to me, this combination of an inner contemplative life and then an intimate relationship with dying is the best practice in this strange age in which we're living right now. So you say, what brought me there? I just kind of fell into it. I was living with Ram Dass, and boom, there it happened. And what keeps me here, I mean, I could say it beats getting a job. I don't know. I'm good at this. I really enjoy being around dying people. I think it's an incredible honor and blessing. And whenever I use the term dying people, there's always room for miracles. There's always room for very unexpected remissions. I have many stories of somebody comes to me and they say, 2 weeks ago, the doctor says, no, 1 week ago, the doctor said I have 2 weeks to live. What can you do? What can we do here? We got a week. And that person was alive and took off for Hawaii 6 months later. So those things happen. But I'm here because I want to wake up. I'm here because I still think that death is very marginalized in our community. The whole and holistic health is conscious dying. That we replace AMA medicine with herbs and chiropractic and all kinds of other things, but it's still pushing death away often with some inner motivation of, I don't like the way this feels, I'm trying to fix it, rather than a deep appreciation of life and death and how they inform each other in a very wonderful way.
How has your why changed in all these years? Has your purpose changed while you've been doing this?
I don't think so. My why changed. No, I still think that conscious dying is a profound gift for an individual. If my why has changed at all, it's in the sense that I'm beginning to really get that the United States, Western society in general, has a collective denial of death. And that collective denial of death is manifesting in so many ways: climate change, social injustice, political divisiveness, all the things we probably shouldn't talk about too deeply right now. But if you really don't know in your bones that you're going to die, then it's possible to get lost in power, to get lost in vengeance, to get lost in all those kinds of things. There was a Christian minister who said, when power is worshipped, compassion and love become sins. And I really feel like right now our society is at a very important point where a lot of people are extremely unhappy. A lot of people are angry at each other. And underneath it all is fear of death. All fear is fear of death. And fear of death equals lack of enlightenment. So maybe the best thing I can do, or you could do, because of the jobs we have, to ameliorate global climate change, political divisiveness, social injustice, is work with the collective fear of death.
A way to contribute, but still within our skill sets and our jobs. So I want to touch back on the term conscious dying. It's not something that we've really focused on as a topic here on the podcast. So tell my listeners what conscious dying means. What does that term look like?
Okay, what is conscious living? And conscious dying is conscious living at the end of life. So what is conscious living? And there are levels to this. Many people are going around rather unconsciously. For instance, suppose you feel really afraid or really angry. Let's use the example of really afraid. Almost always when fear arises, someone will fixate on the trigger, the story. I'm afraid because they're doing this, he's not doing that, the traffic's doing this, my body's doing that. Instead of actually being present, what does it feel like to be afraid? What's going on in my body? What sensations am I feeling? What's going on in my mind? Rather than, I don't want to feel this, I'm going to think about it. I'm going to have this ongoing story. And I work again and again with people who have had a recent cancer diagnosis, a serious cancer diagnosis in many cases. And they have a difficult time not catastrophizing, strategizing, getting lost in the mind all the time about what's going on here. There's a physical sensation in the part of the body that someone has a tumor. Does that mean I'm getting better? Does that mean I'm dying? Right? So that the mind keeps doing that thing. So the first level of conscious living, and which can be applied to conscious dying, is, can I be mindful? Can I be here now? Can I be present? Can I, at least part of the time, let go of all the story, all the narrative, and here I am feeling what's going on. Now, certainly, the mind is not the enemy. We need to use the mind to decide, okay, I'm going to go to this doctor and I'm going to buy these groceries and things like that. But we use the mind so often to avoid feeling this naked interaction with pain, emotional pain, mental pain, physical pain. So that's the first level of conscious dying, is, can you be mindful? Second level is, can you open your heart then to what you're mindful of? You're not just being present, you're being present with an open heart. You're feeling compassion where there is suffering. You're feeling gratitude. You're feeling those heartfelt qualities, loving kindness, compassion, gratitude, forgiveness. And then the next level of conscious dying, when the heart is open enough, and these things can happen rather naturally, and there are certainly practices from all the world's religious traditions to cultivate these qualities. So mindfulness goes to open-heartedness, goes to a tantric understanding of the nature of reality. And what do I mean by that mouthful of words? What I mean by that is, just as an example, so suppose I'm sick, I'm feeling some sensations in my body, I become frightened. So the first thing I do is I pay attention to what it is that's going on, and then I bring open-heartedness, I bring love or compassion to that part of my body or to me that's experiencing it. And then the third quality, this tantra quality, is, and I realize that even this, maybe it's painful, maybe it's pleasurable, maybe it's neutral. Even this is a manifestation of the one source. It's all a manifestation of the Divine Mother or Christ consciousness or Buddha nature or the higher power or whatever you want to call that. And then finally, there's non-duality that Eckhart Tolle and Ramana Maharshi and Ram Dass and even I have talked about. And that's really of crucial importance because my deep belief is that's what we die into. When consciousness leaves the body, it dies into this all one, into this wholeness. And to the extent that you or I or anybody listening to this have had some experiences of that during your lifetime when you're embodied, it's much easier to accept that as you're taking your final breath and consciousness leaving the body. The Tibetan Buddhists say that when you die, there's a light that's as bright as 1,000 suns. That's very bright. And yet, that light is here right now. There's not a path to enlightenment because we're there already. It's just that it seems like I'm in California and you're in Houston, Texas, and you're a woman and I'm a man, and you've got more hair and I've got less hair, and there's all those differences, right? And I'm not saying that's not true, but there is this other level of consciousness that people experience in deep meditation, taking psychedelics, sometimes out in nature or having some deep relationship with music, where for a few moments or hopefully longer even at times, one surrenders, one dies into that sense of wholeness. So also in Buddhism, they have these things called the mind-turning truths, where they're truths that inspire you to wake up. And the first one is you're going to die, but you don't know when. What could be more intellectually obvious than Helen and Dale are going to die, we don't know when. But suppose we really, really were living that you and I did not know. I just met you half an hour ago. That we were ever going to talk to each other or see each other at the end of this podcast, or even beyond that we might not survive, that you or I might die before the end of the podcast or die tonight, that this is our chance. This is our chance for you and I to connect, for me to talk to this microphone and it goes out into the world, right? And every moment is like that. Every moment is that precious opportunity. So that's why I like to work with dying people, because it wakes me up to that.
Yeah. I think it makes you very conscious. In a way, it is such a privilege to work with the dying. And I think a lot of people looking from the outside would not see it that way. But for those of us in the know who step forward to do this work, I think so many of us would say it teaches us gratitude. It teaches us perspective. It teaches us insight. And if we allow it to, we do begin to reflect and to meditate and to really contemplate some of those things. I think it's a great gift to be able to work with the dying. This conversation is so good, but we're going to take a quick break. Hang on for more great content.
This episode is sponsored by Hospice Navigation Services.
If you or someone you care about is dealing with a life-limiting illness, you need a guide. Hospice Navigation Services is here to help you get the best end-of-life care possible. We understand the importance of personalized, experienced support. Hospice navigators provide one-on-one support over the phone or through video calls to guide you every step of the way. They'll answer your questions, explain what hospice care looks like, and give you the tools to feel confident in your decisions. Whether you're planning ahead or you have an urgent need, Hospice Navigation Services helps you and your family understand your options for end-of-life care. A hospice navigation session is a great way to troubleshoot your current hospice care and get answers to your questions. You don't have to go through this alone. You deserve compassionate support and guidance for your end-of-life experience. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. To book your hospice navigation session and receive your free guide to end-of-life care, visit our website at hospicenavigation.com. It's your journey. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. I read something that you wrote. It says, death now is openly talked about. Progress has been made, but there are very few places to go in this country, in the U.S., where death is not approached as just making the best of a terrible situation. Few places that support the profound opportunity for healing and for awakening that dying affords. Never in my adult life has the need for collective healing of our society been so critical. I'm not sure when you wrote that, but it wasn't recent. Would you say that that holds true today, and how so?
Well, I don't remember ever saying that, but it sounds pretty good.
I got it off the internet, so it must be true, right?
I agree with everything that I supposedly said. And I think I kind of covered this a few minutes ago, that it is a very critical time to pay attention. I mean, our society, our democracy, our planet there's a kind of a choice point here, right? And if enough people make the right choice, my hope is that truth and love will carry the day eventually. Maybe I'm not answering the question. What was the basis of the question again there exactly?
Well, really, it was about this: never in your adult life has the need for collective healing of our society been so critical.
Yeah.
But let's put it this way. Have we gotten any better at dying in Western culture in the U.S. over the last 40 years?
Yes.
How so?
Well,
Because, I mean, there's obviously still a long way to go, right? We can barely open our eyes and have the conversations. How have we gotten better at it, do you think?
Well, Ramdas and Stephen Levine and myself and Frank Ostaseski and Joan Halifax and a number of other people have been beating the drum for decades. And I don't know how many tens of thousands of people have come through my podcast and workshops and whatever, and Ramdas and Stephen, much bigger numbers. So organizationally, often hospice, often hospitals are run by corporations trying to make money. At the same time, there are nurses and doctors and social workers and other people working in these institutions that have some understanding of and yearning for conscious living and conscious dying. When I first started doing this work, it was barely acceptable to talk about dying at all. And now there are death cafes, and I will admit that when we first started doing this, Ramdas and Stephen and I thought, when I was starting this dying center, that it would be the first of many. We were going to be the Colonel Sanders of death. And there would be a dying center in every medium and large community in America. And we really underestimated how persistent the denial of death is, how persistent the fear of death is collectively in our society. But I meet more and more people who report to me, I just helped my mother die. I put my job on hold for a month. It was such a remarkable experience. Whereas 40, 50 years ago, that didn't happen. People were shuttled right into the hospital and died behind closed doors, usually, often being lied to about what was actually going on. And nowadays, there are trainings for people to care for your loved ones at home. There's talks about green burials. So it is changing. There's still certainly a lot more to do. But once again, all fear is fear of death. In other words, fear is based on I am afraid of something other than me, that there's a subject and an object. So that's based in fear of death. If this I who's going to die eventually, something's going to happen to this I. And that's the place I'm not enlightened. So that by focusing on fear of death is really one of the core spiritual practices to bring people out of this automatic reactivity, trying to avoid feeling, or on the other hand, repressing or getting lost in feelings, but to really be there for what it is that's going on in life. And when you meet people and you look in their eyes, you can kind of tell how much fear of death that person has processed already. Is somebody able to be right there and look you right in the eye, and they know they're going to die, and they know you're going to die, and it's not a morbid thing. That's just life itself.
Right.
And here we are. So, but a lot of people are up in their head about the whole thing, and you can kind of feel that.
Well, I'm sure after doing this work for 40 years, you have a finely honed sense of these things. So when you think about how we are in the U.S., right, attitudes towards death and end-of-life care and support here, what are your dreams for the U.S.? What would you like us, besides having basically, what did you say, a KFC of conscious dying? Be the Colonel Sanders.
To have a facility in every community where people could come and die and be cared for by people who were relatively conscious and unafraid of death themselves, right? Rather than be lost in the medicalization of death. I mean, if there's still some chance that you can be healed, sure, go to the hospital. But the number of people who die in hospitals who don't need to really be there medically is very large and at great expense.
Yes. And not usually in alignment with what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something on every corner, basically in every town, that would be amazing. So for a conscious dying center to be as commonplace as a fast food restaurant.
Right. And the more fast food restaurants we have, maybe the more need there will be, because people will be dying sooner.
This is true. This is true. So you are a prolific writer and teacher and speaker. Tell me about your latest book.
Well, I don't know how prolific it is. It's a book that took 20 years to write. But anyway, my latest book is called How to Live So You Can Die Without Fear. Publisher, New World Library, has been apologizing at their snail's pace. They've had the book for almost a year now, but it's finally going to be published in the spring. And it's basically what we're talking about here. It's partly a bit of a very short memoir in the beginning, so people will pay attention. Who is this guy who's telling me how to deal with death? But mostly it's taking the basic contemplative spiritual path in a very eclectic way that includes 12 steps in Christianity and Judaism and Hinduism and Buddhism, and stages of early childhood development, awakening of the chakras, Buddhist psychology, mixing all this together in a way that's hopefully very understandable, and applying that then to life, and then to dying, and to caregiving, and to grieving.
Beautiful. Much needed. So, if listeners are interested in the book, where will it be available for purchase?
Well, what I would suggest, since it's not coming out until everybody who's listening to this will have completely forgotten about this podcast, is that I would suggest that instead of waiting for the book, immediately run to our website, livingdying.org, livingdying.org. We have the most complete website on the internet about conscious dying. There's a lot of free material. I have a group every other Saturday, a spiritual support group that has 1,250 people in it. They don't all come. Most of them get the recording, but there are people all around the world. And we have free of charge grief groups, critical illness group, caregiver group, and we have trainings. There's an ongoing online version. There will be some live ones in the beginning of the year where I train people to do this work. And when the book is coming, I assure you that it will be right there on the website. Come and get the book, right? And we also have a speaker series. So our next speaker is this guy, Tony Bossis. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's an NYU professor who works with psychedelic therapy at end of life to deal with fear of dying. So he and I are going to have an online conversation, a Zoom conversation, live conversation on October 25th. So go to the website, sign up on the mailing list. Most things are free. Some of the trainings cost a very reasonable amount of money. We try to make this available to everybody, regardless of their ability to pay.
Perfect. Well, I will have a link in the show notes to your website, and so people can go in, subscribe to the newsletter, and then they'll be made aware when the book comes out in the spring of 2026. Dale, thank you so much for spending time with me today. Your work is amazing and deep, and I'm so honored to have you on the show.
Well, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me and being such a great host.
Thanks for listening to the Heart of Hospice podcast. Check out our sponsor in the show notes, and please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it if you would share this episode with your friends and family and anyone who needs to know more about hospice. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.